Emily Parker had always believed that kindness didn't need a reason. It was something you did because it felt right, even if no one ever knew about it. That belief was put to the test on an ordinary Tuesday evening when she decided to take a walk through Lincoln Park after finishing her shift at St. Mary's Hospital. She loved this time of day. The air was cooler, the streets quieter, and the golden light of the setting sun made everything feel softer, simpler. As she strolled along the winding path near the lake, Emily couldn't help but notice how beautiful the world looked. Ducks floated lazily across the water, their reflections rippling gently in the breeze. Children laughed as they chased each other around the playground, and couples sat hand in hand on benches enjoying the last moments of daylight. For once, Emily felt like she could breathe freely, away from the chaos of the hospital. But then, something caught her eye. On a bench not far ahead, a man sat hunched over, gripping his chest tightly. His face was pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He looked like he was struggling to catch his breath. Without thinking twice, Emily quickened her pace and hurried toward him. "Are you okay?" she asked, kneeling down beside him. The man turned his head slowly, his eyes glazed with pain. I don't know," he managed to say between shallow breaths. "My chest, it hurts." Emily immediately recognized the signs of a possible heart attack. Years of working as a nurse had trained her well. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notepad and pen. "What's your name?" she asked calmly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Daniel," he whispered weakly. "Daniel Hayes." "Well, Daniel, I'm Emily. I'm a nurse. Let me see if I can help." She placed 2 fingers on his wrist to check his pulse. It was rapid and irregular, confirming her suspicions. Time was critical. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, explaining the situation quickly and clearly. While waiting for the ambulance, Emily stayed by Daniel's side, talking to him softly to keep him conscious and reassured. "You're going to be fine," she said, though she wasn't entirely sure herself. "Just focus on breathing. Help is on the way." Daniel nodded faintly, his eyes fluttering shut for a moment before snapping back open. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible. Emily smiled gently. "Don't thank me yet. We've got work to do." Minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air as the ambulance approached. Paramedics rushed to the scene, taking over where Emily had left off. She stepped back, watching as they loaded Daniel onto a stretcher and prepared him for transport. Before they left, one of the paramedics turned to her. "You did good," he said with a nod of approval. "We'll take it from here." Emily watched the ambulance drive away, feeling a mix of relief and worry. She hoped Daniel would pull through, but there was nothing more she could do now. As she walked home, she replayed the events in her mind, wondering who Daniel was and what had brought him to that park bench. Little did she know, her simple act of kindness would have far-reaching consequences. The next morning, Emily arrived at St. Mary's Hospital, ready to start another busy day. But instead of heading straight to the ward, she was summoned to her supervisor's office. Confused, she knocked on the door and entered, finding Mrs. Thompson sitting behind her desk with a stern expression. "Emily, please sit down," Mrs. Thompson said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Emily obeyed, her stomach tightening with unease. "I received a report about your actions last night," Mrs. Thompson began, folding her hands neatly on the desk. "You were seen leaving the premises during your shift and assisting a stranger outside the hospital." "Yes, that's correct," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her throat. "I encountered someone in distress in the park. I called an ambulance and stayed with him until help arrived." Mrs. Thompson sighed heavily, shaking her head. "Emily, I understand your intentions were good, but you violated protocol. You should have contacted emergency services immediately and let them handle the situation. By intervening directly, you put yourself and potentially others at risk." "But I saved his life," Emily protested, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "If I hadn't acted quickly, he might not have made it." "That may be true," Mrs. Thompson conceded, "but rules exist for a reason. We can't make exceptions based on personal judgment. Unfortunately, given the circumstances, we have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." The Words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She stared at Mrs. Thompson, unable to believe what she was hearing. After all her years of hard work, dedication, and sacrifice, she was being fired for helping someone. "I don't understand," Emily said quietly, her voice trembling. "How does saving a life justify losing my job?" "It's not about justifying anything," Mrs. Thompson replied, her tone firm but tinged with regret. "It's about following procedure." "I'm sorry, Emily. This isn't easy for me either." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she stood up, gathering her belongings in silence. She left the office feeling numb, unsure of how to process what had just happened. How could doing the right thing lead to such a devastating outcome? For the rest of the day, Emily wandered aimlessly through the city, replaying the events in her mind. She thought about Daniel, wondering if he was okay. Had he survived? Did he even realize what had happened to her because of him? By the time she returned home, exhaustion had set in. Emily collapsed onto her couch, staring blankly at the wall. She felt lost, betrayed, and angry, not just at her employer, but at the world. Why was it so hard to do the right thing without facing consequences? Despite her despair, a tiny spark of hope lingered within her. Maybe, just maybe, Daniel would find out what had happened and reach out. Maybe he'd offer some kind of explanation, or, better yet, gratitude. But deep down, Emily knew that was wishful thinking. Strangers rarely remembered acts of kindness, especially ones performed in passing. Little did she know, however, that Daniel Hayes wasn't just any stranger. And in 3 days' time, her entire perspective on life and fate would change forever. 3 days had passed since Emily Parker lost her job, and life felt like it was spiraling out of control. She spent most of her time sitting at the kitchen table, staring at piles of bills and job applications. Each envelope seemed heavier than the last, weighing her down with worry about how she would make ends meet. The apartment that once felt like home now felt suffocating, every corner reminding her of what she had lost. It was late afternoon when there was a knock at the door. Startled, Emily glanced up from her paperwork, wondering who could possibly be visiting her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Rising slowly, she walked to the door and opened it cautiously. Standing on the other side was a man in a tailored suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. He looked polished and professional, almost too refined for the modest hallway outside her apartment. His presence was both reassuring and intimidating. "Ms. Emily Parker?" he asked, his tone calm and polite. "Yes." Emily replied hesitantly. "Can I help you?" The man smiled warmly and extended his hand. "My name is Mr. Carter. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Daniel Hayes." Emily froze, her mind racing back to the night in the park. Daniel, the man whose life she had saved, was reaching out. She hadn't expected this. Part of her wanted to slam the door shut, fearing another twist of fate, but curiosity got the better of her. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. Mr. Carter pulled a cream-colored envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. "Mr. Hayes wishes to express his gratitude personally. Inside, you'll find all the details." Emily took the envelope, her fingers brushing against the smooth paper. Why couldn't he just call or send an email? Mr. Hayes prefers face-to-face interactions when it comes to matters of importance, Mr. Carter explained. He believes it's the right thing to do. With that, the man tipped his head slightly and turned to leave, leaving Emily standing in the doorway, clutching the envelope tightly. Once he disappeared down the hall, she closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. What did Daniel want? And why go through so much effort to reach out? She carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. It was written in elegant handwriting, inviting her to meet Daniel at a downtown office building the following morning. The address was unfamiliar, but the words were clear. "Please join me for coffee so we may discuss your kindness." Emily reread the invitation several times, trying to make sense of it. Was this some kind of trick, or was Daniel genuinely grateful? She debated whether to ignore it altogether. but something deep inside urged her to go. Maybe this was her chance to get answers, to understand why helping him had cost her everything. The next morning, Emily dressed simply but neatly, choosing a pair of jeans and a blouse that made her feel presentable without being overly formal. As she stepped into the lobby of the towering skyscraper listed in the invitation, she felt completely out of place. The marble floors gleamed under bright lights and people bustled around in expensive suits, chatting animatedly on their phones. An elevator ride later, Emily found herself in a luxurious conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city skyline, and a long mahogany table dominated the center of the space. At the far end sat Daniel Hayes, looking healthier than the last time she'd seen him. When he noticed her enter, he stood up immediately, his expression softening into a smile. "Emily," he said, walking toward her. "Thank you for coming." "You're welcome," Emily replied, her voice cautious. "Though I wasn't sure if I should." "I can imagine," Daniel admitted, gesturing for her to take a seat. "And I owe you an apology. I never meant for my actions or lack thereof to cause trouble in your life." Emily crossed her arms, studying him closely. "You left before I even knew what happened to you. Then I got fired because of protocol violations. Do you realize how hard that's been for me?" Daniel nodded solemnly. "I do. And I'm truly sorry. When I woke up in the hospital, I didn't think about the consequences of disappearing. All I could focus on was getting away from the chaos." "Chaos?" Emily repeated, raising an eyebrow. Daniel hesitated as if debating how much to reveal. "Let's just say my life isn't always straightforward. Sometimes staying low-key is necessary." Emily frowned, unsure whether to believe him. "That doesn't explain why you're reaching out now." "You're right," Daniel conceded. "But I couldn't let what happened go unacknowledged. You saved my life, Emily. Not many people would have done what you did." Before she could respond, a server entered the room, carrying a tray with coffee and pastries. Daniel poured 2 cups and slid one across the table to her. "So, what happens now?" Emily asked, taking a sip of the coffee. It was rich and smooth, unlike anything she'd ever tasted. "I'd like to compensate you for what you've been through," Daniel said, pulling out a checkbook. "Consider it a token of my gratitude." Emily shook her head firmly. "No, I don't want your money. Helping you wasn't about payment. It was about doing the right thing." Daniel looked surprised, then impressed. "That's admirable, but surely there's something I can do to help." Emily thought for a moment, her gaze drifting to the view outside the window. "If you really want to help, tell me why you ran off like that. Why didn't you stay to explain yourself?" Daniel sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. "As I said earlier, my life is complicated. There are things I can't share. Not yet. But I promise you, my intentions are sincere. If there's any way I can make this right, please let me know." His honesty struck a chord with Emily. Despite her reservations, she sensed that he was telling the truth, or at least part of it. "Fine," she said finally. "For now, I'll accept your apology. But no gifts, no checks, nothing like that. Understand?" Daniel smiled, relief washing over his features. "Understood. Thank you, Emily. You've already given me more than you know." Over the next hour, they talked casually, sharing bits and pieces of their lives. Daniel spoke about growing up in a small town and building his company from scratch, while Emily shared stories from her years as a nurse. Though their worlds were vastly different, they found common ground in their values and passions. By the time Emily left the building, she felt lighter somehow. Meeting Daniel hadn't erased the pain of losing her job, but it gave her a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, good deeds weren't entirely forgotten after all. As she walked back to her apartment, Emily realized that Daniel Hayes wasn't just a billionaire CEO. He was a man with flaws, fears, and a genuine desire to connect. And though she still had questions, she couldn't deny that he had sparked something within her, a belief that kindness might eventually lead to unexpected rewards. Little did she know, This was only the beginning of a journey that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. In the days following their meeting at the skyscraper, Emily's life began to shift in unexpected ways. Daniel Hayes proved to be persistent, reaching out regularly to check on her and offer support. At first, Emily kept him at arm's length, unsure of his intentions. Was he genuinely grateful? Or was this some elaborate scheme to ease his conscience? But as time went on, she started to see glimpses of sincerity in his actions. He wasn't just sending polite messages, he genuinely seemed to care about making things right. One evening, during a casual dinner at a quiet cafe downtown, Daniel surprised Emily with an idea that would change everything. "I've been thinking," he said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "You have incredible skills, not just as a nurse, but as someone who truly understands people and their needs. I want to offer you a position at my foundation." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "Your foundation?" "Yes," Daniel explained, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "We focus on improving healthcare access for underserved communities. It's a cause close to my heart, and I think you'd be perfect to lead new initiatives. Your experience could make a real difference." Emily hesitated, her mind racing. Leading initiatives at a Billionaire's foundation sounded impressive, but it also felt intimidating. She had spent years working directly with patients, not managing projects or overseeing teams. Could she really step into such a role? "I appreciate the offer," she said slowly, "but I'm not sure I'm qualified. My work has always been hands-on, treating patients, not running programs." "That's exactly why you're perfect for this," Daniel insisted. "You understand what these communities need because you've seen it firsthand. You can bridge the gap between policy and practice in a way no one else can." Emily fell silent, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, this opportunity could allow her to help more people than she ever could as a single nurse. On the other hand, stepping away from direct patient care felt like abandoning the very thing she loved most about her job. "What if I fail?" she asked quietly, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her. "You won't," Daniel replied without hesitation. "And even if you stumble, I'll be here to support you every step of the way. This isn't about perfection, it's about impact." His confidence was infectious, and after weeks of deliberation and plenty of encouragement from Daniel, Emily finally accepted the offer. She agreed to join the foundation as the head of community outreach, tasked with designing and implementing programs aimed at expanding healthcare access. Her first few months were a whirlwind of learning curves and challenges. Emily spent long hours poring over reports, attending meetings, and visiting clinics in rural areas. She traveled to small towns where hospitals were scarce and resources were stretched thin. Everywhere she went, she listened to stories of struggle and resilience, using those experiences to shape the foundation's strategies. Daniel remained a constant presence throughout, offering guidance and celebrating her successes. He admired her dedication and often joked that she worked harder than anyone else on his team. But beneath the humor was genuine respect. "You're amazing at this," he told her one afternoon as they reviewed progress reports in his office. "I knew you'd excel, but I didn't realize just how much of a difference you'd make." Emily smiled, though she still sometimes doubted herself. "It's not me. It's the people we're helping. They're the ones doing the hard work. I'm just trying to give them tools to succeed." "That's leadership," Daniel said firmly. "Knowing when to step back and let others shine while still guiding them forward. You're a natural." As their professional relationship deepened, so did their personal connection. They spent countless hours together, discussing everything from project goals to personal dreams. Emily learned that Daniel wasn't the ruthless businessman portrayed in tabloids. He was thoughtful, introspective, and driven by a desire to leave a positive legacy. For his part, Daniel found himself drawn to Emily's authenticity and compassion. In a world where people often wore masks to protect themselves, she was refreshingly real. Her laugh was contagious, her insights sharp, and her kindness unwavering. One evening, after wrapping up a particularly grueling day, Daniel invited Emily to join him for dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, with twinkling lights stretching out as far as the eye could see. This place reminds me of the park where we first met, Daniel said, gazing out at the horizon. Though I doubt I'll ever forget that night, or you. Emily chuckled softly. Funny how life works, isn't it? If someone had told me then that I'd end up working with you, I wouldn't have believed them. Me neither, Daniel admitted. But I'm glad it happened. You've changed my perspective on so many things. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping wine and enjoying the cool breeze. As the night wore on, Daniel turned to Emily, his expression serious. There's something I need to say, he began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. When I met you, I was lost. Not physically, but emotionally. I'd built a successful career, but I didn't feel fulfilled. Then you came along and suddenly everything made sense again. You reminded me of what truly matters, helping others, staying humble, and never losing sight of who I am. Emily felt her cheeks flush, unsure how to respond. Before she could speak, Daniel continued. I know we come from different worlds, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. You're not just my colleague, you're my friend, my confidant, and maybe someday something more. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Emily looked at him, her heart pounding. She had wondered about the growing bond between them but hadn't dared to put a name to it. Now, faced with Daniel's honesty, she realized she felt the same way. I don't know what the future holds, she said softly, but I do know that I trust you. And that's rare for me. Daniel smiled, relief washing over his face. That's all I ask. For now. Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out together. As they left the restaurant, walking side by side under the starlit sky, Emily couldn't help but feel hopeful. Life had thrown her curveballs, but somehow she had landed exactly where she was meant to be. Little did she know, however, that challenges still lay ahead. Fame, fortune, and public scrutiny were forces that could test even the strongest bonds. But for now, Emily chose to focus on the present, the man beside her, the work they were doing, and the promise of brighter days to come. As Emily settled deeper into her role at Daniel's foundation, whispers about Daniel's past began to surface. At first, they were subtle, comments from colleagues or articles shared online, but soon they grew louder and more persistent. Journalists dug up old stories about his rise to success, painting him as a ruthless businessman who crushed competitors and betrayed allies. Some even accused him of using Emily's story as a PR stunt to clean up his image. Emily tried to ignore the rumors, focusing instead on the work she loved. But it wasn't easy. Friends and acquaintances started asking her pointed questions. Are you sure you can trust him? One friend asked during a phone call. People like Daniel Hayes don't just change overnight. The doubts gnawed at her no matter how hard she tried to push them aside. Was she being naive? Had Daniel manipulated her into joining his foundation? Or worse, was their growing bond part of some calculated plan? One evening, after another long day at the office, Emily confronted Daniel. They were alone in his apartment, sitting in the living room surrounded by the quiet hum of the city outside. She held up a tabloid magazine featuring a scathing headline, Billionaire, Philanthropist, or Master Manipulator. What's going on, Daniel? She asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. Why are people saying these things about you? And why didn't you tell me any of this before? Daniel sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. He looked tired, as if he'd been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Knew this would happen eventually, he admitted, his tone heavy with regret. My past isn't pretty, Emily. When I was building my company, I made decisions I'm not proud of. I stepped on people to get ahead, and yes, I burned bridges along the way. But that's not who I am anymore, or at least it's not who I want to be. Emily stared at him, searching his face for signs of dishonesty. So, all those accusations, are they true? Some of them are exaggerated, Daniel replied cautiously. But others, yeah, they're based on facts. I've done things I'm not proud of. But I've also worked hard to make amends, to use my wealth and influence for good. And what about me? Emily pressed, her voice rising slightly. Am I just part of your redemption arc? Did you hire me because I fit into some grand plan to look better in the public eye? No, Daniel said firmly, leaning forward to meet her gaze. You saved my life, Emily. That's why I reached out to you, not because I needed a PR boost, but because I wanted to thank you. Everything else, the job, the foundation, it came later. You have to believe me. For a moment, Emily didn't respond. She wanted to trust him, to believe that his intentions were genuine. But the doubts lingered, whispering in the back of her mind. If that's true, she said finally, then prove it. Show me who you really are. Daniel nodded, understanding the challenge she had laid down. Over the next few weeks, he invited Emily to see more of his world. He took her to meetings with investors, introducing her as an equal rather than an employee. He showed her the inner workings of his company, explaining both its successes and failures. Most importantly, he introduced her to the people whose lives had been touched by his foundation. Families who now had access to affordable health care, children receiving scholarships to pursue education, and communities rebuilding after natural disasters. Through these experiences, Emily began to see a different side of Daniel. Yes, he had made mistakes in the past, but he was actively working to right those wrongs. His efforts weren't perfect, but they were sincere. Still, the shadows of doubt refused to disappear completely. One morning, as Emily scrolled through social media, she stumbled across a new wave of attacks. This time, the accusations hit closer to home. Leaked documents allegedly proved that Daniel had embezzled funds from his own foundation. The headlines screamed betrayal, and the internet erupted with outrage. Emily felt sick to her stomach. If the allegations were true, it meant everything she had worked for was built on lies. She stormed into Daniel's office, slamming the door behind her. "What is this?" she demanded, shoving her phone in front of him. "Is it true? Did you steal money from your own foundation?" Daniel's face went pale as he read the article. For a moment he said nothing, his hands gripping the edge of his desk tightly. "I swear to you, Emily, I had nothing to do with this," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "These documents are fake. They're part of a smear campaign. Someone is trying to destroy me." "Who would do that?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A disgruntled former employee," Daniel explained bitterly. "Someone I fired years ago for unethical behavior. He's been waiting for a chance to take me down ever since." Emily didn't know what to believe. Part of her wanted to trust Daniel, but the evidence against him seemed damning. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to investigate alongside him. Together, they hired a private investigator and combed through financial records, emails, and security footage. It wasn't easy. Days turned into weeks as they worked tirelessly, often staying up late into the night. The pressure mounted as public opinion turned sharply against Daniel. Reporters camped outside his office demanding statements. Donors pulled funding from the foundation, threatening to undo all the progress they had made. Through it all, Emily remained steadfast, refusing to abandon him or the cause they had fought so hard for. Finally, after nearly a month of relentless digging, they found the smoking gun, proof that the leaked documents had been forged. The disgruntled ex-employee had fabricated the evidence in an act of revenge, hoping to ruin Daniel's reputation once and for all. Armed with the truth, Daniel held a press conference to clear his name. Standing beside him as he addressed the crowd, Emily felt a surge of pride. Despite the odds, Daniel had faced the accusations head-on, proving his innocence. The scandal faded as quickly as it had begun, leaving behind valuable lessons about trust, integrity, and resilience. When the dust settled, Emily realized something important. Daniel wasn't perfect, but neither was she. What mattered most was how they chose to move forward, together. "You stuck by me when everyone else walked away," Daniel said one evening as they sat on the rooftop of his building, watching the sunset. "I'll never forget that." "You earned my trust," Emily replied simply. "Not because you're flawless, but because you're willing to fight for what's right." As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. Life with Daniel wouldn't always be easy, but it would be worth it. Together they had weathered the storm and emerged stronger than ever. In the months following the scandal, Emily and Daniel threw themselves into their work at the foundation. With Daniel's name cleared, they focused on rebuilding trust, not just with donors and partners, but with the communities they served. It was a slow process requiring patience, transparency, and unwavering dedication, but for both of them, it was also deeply rewarding. One project stood out above the rest: a remote clinic in Montana designed to provide healthcare access to an underserved mountain community. For years, residents had traveled hours to reach the nearest hospital, often delaying treatment until conditions worsened. When Emily first proposed the idea to Daniel, he immediately embraced it, seeing it as an opportunity to make a tangible difference. "Let's do more than just fund the clinic," Daniel suggested during one of their brainstorming sessions. "Let's visit the site ourselves and see the impact firsthand." Emily agreed, excited by the prospect of stepping away from meetings and paperwork to connect directly with the people they were helping. A few weeks later, they boarded a private plane bound for Montana, leaving behind the chaos of the city for the tranquility of nature. The journey was breathtaking. As they flew over rolling hills and endless forests, Emily marveled at the vastness of the landscape. She had never seen anything like it before, the kind of untouched wilderness that reminded her how small yet significant human efforts could be. When they arrived, they were greeted by cheers and applause. Locals lined up outside the newly constructed clinic, eager to meet the people behind the project. Emily felt humbled as she shook hands and listened to heartfelt stories of gratitude. One elderly woman, tears streaming down her face, hugged Emily tightly. "You've given us hope," the woman said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We won't have to bury our loved ones because we couldn't get help in time." Daniel stood nearby, observing the scene with quiet pride. He watched as Emily interacted with the crowd, her natural warmth putting everyone at ease. To him, she was a beacon of light, someone who inspired others simply by being herself. Later that evening, after the celebrations wound down, Emily and Daniel took a walk along a nearby trail. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine. "This feels right," Emily said softly, breaking the silence. "Being here, seeing the difference we're making. It reminds me why I started this journey in the first place." "I know what you mean," Daniel replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes I forget how much good we can do when we focus on what truly matters. You've taught me that, Emily." She smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Over the past year, their bond had grown stronger, rooted in mutual respect and shared values. They weren't just colleagues or friends anymore. They were partners in every sense of the word. As they continued walking, Daniel stopped suddenly, turning to face her. His expression was serious, almost nervous. "There's something I need to say," he began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "I've thought about this moment for a long time, but I wanted to wait until the timing felt right. And now, I think it does." Emily looked at him curiously, unsure of what was coming next. "What is it?" Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate silver ring adorned with a single diamond. Emily gasped, her heart skipping a beat. "Emily Parker," Daniel said, his eyes locked onto hers. "You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've shown me the power of kindness, the importance of humility, and the beauty of second chances. I can't imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she stared at the ring, then at Daniel. Her mind raced with thoughts and emotions, but one thing was certain. She loved him. More than anything, she believed in the life they could build together, a life dedicated to helping others while cherishing each other. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes, I'll marry you." Daniel's face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. They embraced tightly, holding on to each other as if afraid the moment might slip away. Over the next few days, Emily and Daniel stayed in Montana, soaking in the peaceful surroundings and dreaming about their future. They talked about combining their strengths, her compassion and his resources, to expand the foundation's reach even further. They envisioned mobile clinics, educational programs, and partnerships with local organizations. But they also made time for themselves, exploring the wilderness and enjoying moments of quiet reflection. On their final morning, they climbed to a high ridge overlooking the valley below. The view was stunning, with golden sunlight streaming through the trees and distant rivers winding like ribbons through the landscape. "It's beautiful," Emily said, her voice filled with awe. "It is," Daniel agreed, glancing at her, "but not as beautiful as you." Emily laughed, playfully nudging him. "You're such a sap sometimes." "And you love it," he teased back, pulling her into a hug. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Emily realized something profound. Fate had brought them together in the most unexpected way. What had started as a random act of kindness in a park had blossomed into a partnership that transcended careers, scandals, and challenges. Together, they had faced adversity and emerged stronger, united by a shared vision of making the world a better place. Life wouldn't always be easy, of course. There would still be obstacles to overcome and sacrifices to make. But as long as they had each other, and the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could spark monumental change, they knew they could handle whatever came their way. On the flight back home, Emily glanced at the ring on her finger, its sparkle catching the light. She smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Whatever the future held, she was ready, for Daniel, for the foundation, and for the life they were building together. And deep down, she knew that the best was yet to come. Months passed after Emily said yes to Daniel's proposal, and life seemed to settle into a rhythm of joy and purpose. Their engagement became a symbol of hope, not just for themselves, but for everyone who had witnessed their journey. Friends, family, and even strangers celebrated their union, seeing it as proof that kindness and perseverance could lead to something beautiful. The wedding was held in the same park where they had first met, creating a sense of poetic symmetry. It wasn't an extravagant affair. Instead, it was intimate and heartfelt, attended by close friends, colleagues, and members of the communities they had helped through the foundation. White chairs were arranged in neat rows facing the lake, adorned with garlands of wildflowers. A string quartet played soft music as guests mingled, sharing stories and laughter. Emily walked down the aisle wearing a simple yet elegant gown, her eyes fixed on Daniel waiting for her at the altar. He looked handsome in a classic suit, his expression one of awe and admiration. As she approached him, he whispered, "You're breathtaking," making her blush despite the seriousness of the moment. The ceremony was brief, but deeply meaningful. Instead of traditional vows, they chose to speak from the heart. "Daniel," Emily began, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "you came into my life when I least expected it. You reminded me that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. You've taught me to trust again, to believe in second chances, and to never stop fighting for what matters most. I promise to stand by your side no matter what challenges we face, because I know we can overcome anything. Together." When it was Daniel's turn, he took a deep breath before speaking. "Emily, you saved more than just my life that night, in the park. You saved my soul. You showed me that success isn't measured by wealth or power, but by how much good we can do for others. You've made me a better person, and I promise to spend every day of my life honoring the love and trust you've given me." As they exchanged rings and sealed their promises with a kiss, the crowd erupted into applause. Tears flowed freely, not just from the couple but from everyone present. It was a celebration of love, resilience, and the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could change lives. After the ceremony, the reception unfolded under twinkling fairy lights strung between trees. Tables were decorated with candles and fresh flowers, creating a cozy, magical atmosphere. Guests enjoyed delicious food, heartfelt speeches, and lively dancing. At one point, Daniel pulled Emily onto the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. As they swayed together, surrounded by loved ones, Emily felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought back to the night they had met. The fear, the uncertainty, the leap of faith she had taken in helping a stranger. Now, here they were, beginning a new chapter filled with endless possibilities. "You know," Daniel murmured during the dance, "I never believed in fate until I met you." "Neither did I," Emily admitted with a smile. "But now, I think maybe it was meant to be." Life after the wedding continued to unfold beautifully. Together, Emily and Daniel expanded the foundation's reach, launching initiatives that touched countless lives. Mobile clinics traveled to remote areas, bringing healthcare to those who needed it most. Scholarships funded education for underprivileged students, giving them opportunities they otherwise wouldn't have had. And partnerships with local organizations strengthened communities, empowering people to take charge of their futures. Through it all, Emily remained grounded, never forgetting why she had become a nurse in the first place, to help others. Daniel supported her every step of the way, using his resources and influence to amplify her efforts. Their partnership was a perfect blend of compassion and strategy, proving that two people working toward a common goal could achieve extraordinary things. Still, they didn't lose sight of their personal relationship. Despite their busy schedules, they carved out time for each other. Quiet dinners at home, weekend hikes in the mountains, or simply sitting together on the couch watching movies. These moments reminded them of the importance of balance and connection, ensuring that their bond stayed strong amidst the demands of their work. One evening, nearly a year after their wedding, Emily and Daniel returned to the park bench where it all began. They sat side by side, holding hands as they watched the sun dip below the horizon. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves, and the world felt peaceful and still. "It's funny," Emily said softly, breaking the silence. "This bench changed everything." "It did," Daniel agreed, squeezing her hand gently. "If I hadn't collapsed here that night, I might never have met you. And if you hadn't stopped to help me, I'd probably still be lost." Emily smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Maybe that's why we ended up here, to remind us how far we've come." Daniel nodded, his gaze fixed on the shimmering lake. "We've been through so much together. Scandals, doubts, challenges, but none of it broke us. If anything, it made us stronger." "It's because we trusted each other," Emily added. "And because we never gave up, even when things got hard." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, reflecting on their journey. From that fateful night in the park, to the scandal that tested their bond, to the foundation that brought them closer, every step had led them to this moment. Eventually, Daniel turned to Emily, his expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't helped me that night?" "All the time," Emily admitted. "But then I realized something. It doesn't matter. What matters is what we've built since then. A life filled with love, purpose, and meaning." Daniel smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're amazing, you know that? You've changed not just my life, but the lives of thousands of people. And I'll spend the rest of mine trying to live up to the example you set." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, though they were tears of happiness. "You already have," she said simply. "Every day you show me what it means to be kind, humble, and brave." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Emily and Daniel rose from the bench, hand in hand. They walked slowly along the path, savoring the quiet beauty of the evening. Ahead of them lay a future full of promise, a future shaped by their shared values, dreams, and unwavering commitment to making the world a better place. And as they disappeared into the night, the park remained behind, silent and timeless, bearing witness to the story of two lives forever intertwined by fate, courage, and love.